Hello,
Yeah.
everyone. Welcome
Tell
to
you
the
a funny story
wire.
after.
Welcome to the wire. Thank you for giving us this hour of your day, of your week, of your precious service excellence preparation time. I was talking to our assessors the other day, and we were all in agreement that attending these sessions really does improve your outcome at the assessment. Like we can just see the difference in how people go at the on-site assessment as a result of being here and being connected and getting a chance to ask questions. So good decision to join us or to be watching this. I'd like to welcome everybody here. I'd like to acknowledge that I am on beautiful Biripi country in Port Macquarie, mid-North Coast, New South Wales, and I would like to acknowledge their elders past, present, emerging, and their deep connection to the land and waters here, and the diversity of Aboriginal culture right across beautiful New South Wales. Why don't you tell me where you are? Type in the chat. Tell us the country that you're on and the town or suburb that you're in, and we'll see, what sort of a spread we have, and we can be respectful in our start today. I've got three lovely assessors here. I've got Lisa, amazing assessor Lisa, waving at you there. I've got Kay, amazing assessor Kay, waving at you there. And doesn't she rock those headphones, everyone? Not everyone can do that. Look at Kay, she's rocking those headphones. And we've got Kylie, lovely assessor Kylie there, waving at you, Kylie. Oh, there she is. There we go. So wonderful team of assessors. There's more of us, but those are the ones that are free today. And Kylie's going to be presenting some really great stuff that she's been doing around making governance performance appraisals easy peasy. Thank you, everyone. Oh, yeah, we're right across it. Well, I hope you're all wonderful and happy and safe where you are, and dry, at least dry for a day or two. I know the waters have been rising around some of our friends out west. Excellent stuff. Well, here we are. Let's get going. What can we cover today? What's our opportunity today? We're going to talk about what the standards say about governance performance evaluation. We'll then talk about the why. Like, what do you think, why do you think it's important? What do you think you can get out of it? I'll be polling you on whether or not you already have a process in place for governance performance appraisal, and how that's working. What do you use? So this is a sharing forum, isn't it? So if you're using something amazing, share that with us. We'll share with you what we're using with our clients. And I've got, Janella wants to join. She's coming back. That's lovely. So yeah, we've got lots of resources for you as usual, and you'll get the recording here that you might want to share with some of your board members, or maybe all of your board members. Don't leave anyone out. Very good. Here comes a little poll. Now, I want this to work. I haven't really tried this function for a while, but what should happen is a question will appear on your screen and you get to answer it. And then I'll share the results with everybody. Let's just see how this goes. And if you're not seeing anything on your screen, just let me know, because otherwise it's just, it's a dead air. And oh no, it's working. Wonderful. Packing your bags to go home means you're in the car, you're on the way home. Like Lisa, you're finished and you're on the way home writing the report.
Yes, and then I get to turn around and get back in the car on Saturday. So very exciting.
Where are you heading off to?
I'm off to Canberra on Saturday. I've tacked on a race on Sunday, and off to Canberra for an assessment.
And we like to call that a pleasure trip, mixing business and leisure. That's what we like to do at Highwire. We like to have our pleasure trips. We'll always make the most of the place that we're in.
My husband got to play golf at Foster while I was working.
Good. You took your husband along. Very good. Staff. You've got staff, Lisa.
driver, life coach.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. I think everybody's voted there. Let me just, I'm going to end that now. If you haven't voted, too bad, so sad. And then I get to share the results with you. Now, you should be seeing those results on your screen. Is that correct? Somebody let me know that you're seeing it. What have we got here? We've got some people who are still booking the tickets. We've got some people who've just landed. Look at all those people who are fully in the swing of it. 50% of the people in our room are fully in the swing of it. And packing your bags. Look at that, 17% of people there. Done and dusted, and they're feeling good, or they've got their assessment week or so. That's what packing your bags means to me. And we don't have anybody lost in transit. Well, that is wonderful. That is wonderful. I'm very, very glad about that. Thank you for participating in our little poll there. There's another little poll coming up in a minute about how many of you have a process in place for your governance performance appraisal. All right, so let's quickly have a look at the requirement. So what I'm going to be opening up now is the evidence guide, the version 9 evidence guide, she says. And the version 9 evidence guide looks a little like this. And I've gone down. If you're following along in your evidence guide, you're on page 15 there. And have a look at that. It's part of the governance standard, this indicator. And the sound governance standard 2.1. And the outcome here is stakeholders are confident that governance supports long-term organisational success. So that's what the intent of this standard is. And this indicator that we're looking at today, 2.1.4, it's quite explicit, isn't it? Monitoring and evaluation of the governing body are undertaken. So monitoring and evaluation. So, keeping an eye on it, monitoring, regularly looking at it as a bit of a system, I suppose, and seeing that it's all working well, and evaluating it, meaning, I suppose, having a look at how well it's performing. Is it performing at sort of a mediocre level, or a poor level, a good level, or is it exceeding? Is it hugely successful? Give this organisation an award type successful. So that's what monitoring and evaluation would mean. The governing body. Now, the governing body can include the members of the board, those executive and non-executive members of the board, and sometimes it will include the CEO in the governing body. All right, so it just depends on how you look at it. But the governing body is the body responsible for, the running of the organisation, the top level of leadership and management. And the requirements here are that the governing body has developed a process and a set of criteria. Right. And that should be documented. All right, so how do you do it, and what's the criteria against which you are assessing your performance? So, we're going to talk to you in a moment about using good governance principles and good governance frameworks to develop a set of criteria. So that's your starting point. That membership of the board is regularly reviewed. So membership of the board regularly reviewed to ensure that you have the skills and knowledge to deliver on your mission, to deliver on your strategic goals. We do work with lots of organisations who have as a strategic goal to diversify their funding, for example, or to own their own building, for example, or even to move into different markets. And so reviewing the membership on your board to ensure that you've got the skills to be able to go there, the capabilities to go there is what we're talking about there. That monitoring and evaluation of governing body and governance practices occurs regularly. So governance practices They would mostly be documented in something like a governance manual or, a collection of governance policies and procedures, and that there's evidence that they're regularly reviewed. So we would see, just as we would see your policies and procedures being regularly reviewed, we'd need to see your governance guiding documents regularly reviewed as well. Right, so with dates and things like that. That the organisational chart would be updated, delegations would be updated. Good practice would see you doing it annually. However, if you're a small, low-risk organisation, every 2 years would be fine. Now, the documentation examples there, that is a list that's a bit light on. So I wouldn't be using that as your checklist. I'd be using what we talk about here today as the checklist of good performance. And everybody's going for exemplary, I know. Nobody's going for mediocre. Everybody's going for greatness here. So we're going to list for you today the sorts of things that we'd like to see as evidence before we leave. Okie doke. So that's what the standards say. Now, what do we generally see? What do we generally see? I'm happy to hear from assessors here. Some of the examples that we have seen, both, exceeding and not meeting. Yeah, so some FIPs and some PIPs.
I see skills audits a lot, but not necessarily performance review.
Yeah, so there's a list of the board members and their various skills or, areas of interest, those sorts of things. That's great that you see that. What else would we see? Sometimes see that organisations do a good job of maybe doing an individual self-assessment. So they send something out to the board members and the board members would complete like a questionnaire or a survey and it comes back. I often see those completed forms. You know what I don't see though? Is it following through to an action plan? Yeah, so I see them completed often, but I don't see it translating into improvement. So there's nothing that sort of gives it the legs. So that's something that I see. Kay, anything through your experience that you've noticed around this?
Can I ask a question first of all? I just wanted to ask, when you say you don't see it translated through to action on that, how and where would you expect to see that?
Well, I would expect that the survey results would be collated. Like if it's a self-assessment, it's done by even 8 board members. I would expect that would be collated, summarised for themes, like strengths and areas for development. And I would expect that any areas for development would turn into, maybe it's called a board action plan or a board improvement plan. And
so would it be acceptable to see that like discussed in a board meeting, perhaps, like just something tabled at a board meeting as a follow-up item?
Yes, as long as it was a mechanism to be able to track how we were going, ticking those off. Because if you say, oh, we've got to do these 6 things here, I don't think you've got a chance to make that happen unless you've actually got some sort of a plan around it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that's great, Kay. Thank you.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, sometimes you certainly see like governance policy suites, but sometimes smaller organisations might just have a handbook, something like that. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. A handbook's a great idea to consolidate all of those governance policies and procedures into one place for the board members. It's a great idea, unless you're working electronically, in which case you can have, a folder that's accessed and, however it's accessed. Yeah, that's a great idea. But we need to see that they're regularly reviewed. Thanks, Kylie.
In our experience, I was fortunate enough to lead an organisation for the ACES process.
What did you have for lunch? Your sound is crap. What's happened to your voice? Can you be a bit closer to your mic, maybe? Because it's sounding like a robot. Hang on. It feels like it's not the right receiver or something.
Okay, I'm going to change. I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to change Wi-Fi. So I'm going to change Wi-Fi.
Okay, thanks, Kylie. That's just a bit hard to hear, wasn't it? Hello, Danella and other people who've just joined us there. We're just talking about the sorts of things that we see, you know, things that working well around performance appraisal and things that sort of might appear as gaps. So the other thing that sometimes happens is the board will think about the skills it has, as Lisa said, but they're not necessarily thinking about their governance practice, you know, in terms of looking at indicators of success. So boards are often a little bit light on when it comes to succession planning, you know, and it's just as hard to get board members if you're in a regional location. It's just as hard to get board members as it is to get staff, you know, and it's hard to get the right board members. So having a succession plan, you know, a way of using the membership or skilling up people through mentoring to come through, you know, even considering, how's this for a crazy idea? Young people. All right. I mean, I feel sometimes like you kind of have to be over 55 or 60 to be on a board, the way I see it, but no, young people. And, you know, so anyone over 18 generally, you know, can be mentored and coached to help you with your decision making and planning, you know. So it's wonderful to have lots of perspectives, and succession planning can help you to kind of get targeted about how you attract those kinds of members. Yes, especially if, you know, I mean, I think boards should be representative as well, and oftentimes they're not. Oftentimes they are the people who've got the time, or they're the people who've, you know, been there for 20 years or so, and they're you know, passionate and committed, but not, I don't always see the representation of the community or of the kind of work that the organisation's doing. Sometimes I don't see that, and sometimes I don't see the level of skill that's required on the board, you know, which can be attracted or it can be trained, you know, but I sometimes see that the boards are lacking in the skills they need. And my colleagues and people in the room might say that as well about their own boards, you know, that's been a challenge. It is a challenge. So succession planning is a pretty important part of this as well, particularly for those executive roles. Yeah. So questions can come at any time. Kylie, when you're ready with your audio, feel free to jump in.
How's that? Is that better? Yay.
It's better. Thank you.
Beauty. Yeah, what I was going to say before, Maurice, I was fortunate enough to have led an organisation through the ACES process in the not too recent past when I was on the other side of things. And what I found was I worked for quite a large organisation, so we had some really great documentation in place, but there was a lot of it and a lot to do. And so I think with the board self-assessment, we had a few different questionnaires. No one had really settled on one or chosen which framework they were going to use. And then sort of people sitting back going, well, whose job is it to lead that and make it happen? You know? So it was sort of that time pause. So even though they had something there, they knew they had to do something, but not really sure whose role it was or which path to go down. So that's sometimes the challenge too, when we're a bit spoilt for choice with some great frameworks out there.
Fantastic. Yes. Well, who should lead it? Those of you who have got a performance appraisal process in your organisation, you know, how is it launched? You know, how is it led? That's a question I'll come back to in a moment. Here's our next poll. I'm glad this is working. Here we go.
Oh.
Okay, that's good. I'll give you another a couple of seconds there to put your answers in. Oh, well, that's looking amazing. I'll share that with you. There we go. Look what we've got there. We've got 58% of the room have got a process. That's good. So we'll be able to hear from some people about how that's working. 8% don't have the process, and 33%, as I would expect, not sure, because it might be a process that's 100% owned by the board. But I feel like the results of the evaluation should be shared, so it'd be great if people across the organisation did know. So people who have got an evaluation process in place, does anybody want to share what that looks like and how it when does it happen? Who can share? Thanks, Emily. And then we'll hear from Jonathan.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I was just hoping there would be a fourth option on that survey that said partially in place.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I would have answered.
So you've got a process.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've got a process. It's just maybe it doesn't happen the way that you like. All right.
We've got some things that have been mentioned. So we've got, we do regular reviews of our governance and the people that make up our board. So things like a board skills matrix, reviewing how effective it is, where the gaps are, that kind of thing. We're really looking to do a survey at some point later this year or early next year as well. But I think the thing that's missing for us that's been raised is what you said, is sort of translating that into actions and trackable actions. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that. We're sort of partially there, but there's still quite a bit of work, I think, for us to do.
Good. Well, this discussion about what this framework could potentially look like helps you to see, how much you've got and how much you might need to work on. So, and there's lots of help here too, Emily. Thanks for sharing. Jonathan.
Yeah. So what I'm looking at is that the board of the Northern Centre, who's engaged me to be the sort of project coordinator, they engaged an external agency. They sort of gave them the scope of the evaluation, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And so they delivered a report of the evaluation and to the board. And I'm still going through the sort of the board minutes. Yeah. Basically, I'm just brought in looking at all the documentation, and they sort of report on that. I don't know how frequently, because I have to read 2 years worth of board papers. I'm not up to that yet, but it's that was their approach. They get an external, they do that. Some of the things you mentioned about succession planning, they've sort of integrated that into what they're doing. And that's part of risk matrix that they do for the board as well in those areas. Yeah.
Sounds awesome. Jonathan, are you saying that report is shared across the organisation or with particular stakeholders?
I know, that's what I have to find out about. I've been sort of in this position for about 6 weeks, I should say. Yeah, 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks.
What's wrong with you? Come on, crack on.
Crack on. Yeah. So what I'm finding is there's all different levels of documentation and access to it. So I'm sort of collating it together, and I'm still finding out what's sort of shareable, because there's a management drive, there's a financial controller drive. So I'm getting access into that, the casework stuff. And then I think I'll be, the next step is how much of that documentation is transparent across the organisation, right down, obviously staff, board, and then stakeholders, partners, etc. Because there'll be some hierarchy and protocol. Yeah. I'm guessing of, which is fair enough.
Secrets. There could be secrets in there that you need to keep.
Yeah, and industrial stuff and staff stuff and client stuff. So everything is sort of, it's a bit protocol-y to get into, but yeah, I'm learning as I'm going along, basically.
Well, that's awesome. A great way to learn about an organisation, I think, to have a read of those minutes.
Yeah,
we find that when we get access to board meeting minutes, it's good intel.
Yeah, yeah. And being sort of outside and coming in, it's really good, because you're like, the unknowing knower thing. You just come in and just put it together, but work with the staff. Yeah, no,
That's
a good
it.
process.
That's knowledge. All that knowledge there.
Mm.
Aliska.
Oh, hi, Marie. I just had a question. Is that okay to ask? No, yeah. So, is doing the evaluation internally a risk in itself? Should it be external? Because
We're getting up to that. It's a beautiful segue
Oh,
into where we're
okay.
heading. It's yes, and I can talk about that now, unless there's any other people who'd like to share the way it happens in their organisation. But let's talk about approaches. So no, in a moment we'll talk about approaches. I'd really love Kylie to sort of preach to the converted here about the why of performance evaluation, and we're just aware that there might be boards watching this and sort of thinking, well, why is this part of this framework? What's the purpose of it, and what can be the potential impact of it? Over to you, Kylie.
Thanks, Marie. So yeah, it's a lot of the things that we've sort of spoken about before. We know, and it's kind of something that's relatively new, a board self-assessment. There are kind of been things floating around, but it wasn't until really ACES came out and said, right, this needs to be done because we know it has value. For all of the reasons that we've sort of spoken about, it's really an opportunity for the board. If you think about it, boards are so fundamental to our sector and to our organisations, and yet they spend really not too much time together. They form, sometimes they've been working together for a long time, or sometimes they've got new board members coming in who need to get up to speed really fast. We've just come out of a really interesting period of COVID for 2 years where people haven't met face to face for 2 years. And so you've got all of these reasons why I think it's really a great opportunity and fundamental that boards really sort of stop and do some reflection on what is it that they're there to do. Are they all really clear on what their mandate is, what their community and stakeholders and staff need from them, and what's expected of them if they have and hold different roles, if you're a chairperson or a treasurer or so it's a really good opportunity in terms of sort of assessing and making sure that they all have that same understanding. It's a great kind of levelling tool and a great almost induction or a reminder tool of what it is that you're there to do. Because as you can imagine, with people from lots of different experiences and backgrounds, whether you're new to boards or not, or you've been served on boards for many years, the world is changing and times are changing. And so it's such a great opportunity to have that conversation as a board to say, what are we doing well? What is our mandate? Are we clear on what our mandate is? Are we focused on our priorities? Are we communicating with our stakeholders? Are we as engaged as we'd like to be? Are we utilising our skills as best as we can for the organisations that we serve? Are we truly harnessing all of the skills in this board and giving back to the organisation? And what are our gaps? Being really open and honest, because again, times are changing. A couple of years ago, probably fundraising was not as important as it is now, and branding and communications and technology. So you've got also new skill sets that are emerging that are quite important for bringing onto the board. So that skills assessment is really important. So there's two components, as Marie sort of said before. It's the board self-assessment and evaluation of how they're doing. Are they gelling? Are they working well together? Are they doing what they need to do? Are they focused on the right things? And then the individual skills assessment. And as we mentioned before, there's lots of different ways and lots of fantastic toolkits out there. And things that you can sort of get online, and there's been lots of research in this place, and as I mentioned, tools that you can use. The one that I like to work with, but as I mentioned, there's lots, is the Community Sector Governance Capability Framework. So the Victorian State Government developed that and launched it back in 2017. The reason I like it is because it went through an iterative process. So there was lots of trial and evaluation and feedback to improve it, to make it really usable and simple. But guess what? The toolkit is 100 pages. So So it's excellent, right? You've got everything there, but then who's going to pick up that toolkit? Who's got time to read through the 4 or 5 different documents and the tools that you need to sort of to implement that? And so that's where people like me, I've come from working on the client side, on the agency side, and I loved it. But really what I saw was, you know, no shortage of tools and things to use. It was often just, you know, people being time poor. And so I'm getting some comments. Yeah, I'm absolutely going to share with you what we're going to, you know, the toolkit. But yeah, it's just sort of being time poor and who takes the lead on these things. And that was a great question about who should lead it. Should it come from within, or, you know, is it nice to have that kind of independent thinking, external thinking come in? And I think from the board self-assessments I've worked on, that has been really helpful to probably get to the heart of some of the issues that were going on that perhaps, you know, people within an organisation might not feel that comfortable to tackle with their board. So it does allow, you know, external consultants like ourselves to sort of get that context of what is going on, you know. So that's, do you want me to talk through the process, Marie, that we sort of go through? Is this one option? This is one way of doing it, is a toolkit that we've developed. Yeah.
If I could, I'd just
Yeah.
like to just talk about the different approaches.
Yeah.
Because there isn't a requirement that you use an external facilitator. Some organisations decide on their criteria themselves. Like they sit together and they say, right, what are our indicators of success when it comes to governance? And they list those, and then they, from year to year, they assess themselves against those indicators, self-selected indicators. That's absolutely fine, but they should be indicators that lead you towards sustainability and achieving your mission and strategic goals. They shouldn't, you know, there should be alignment with where you're going, and the indicators of success should be those that are actually getting you there. So when we have a look at those indicators, I would always make a comment about whether or not I see alignment there, or whether I see, well, that's nice to have, but it's sort of, you know, where's it getting you in terms of the direction that you've set for yourself, you know, for the organisation. So that's when it comes to selecting your own indicators, that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is alignment with good governance practice, contemporary good governance practice. And so the Australian Institute of Company Directors, Australian Institute of Community Directors, the Australian Institute of Indigenous Governance, you know, those kinds of organisations can, they produce frameworks for you to align your practice with or to check your practice against. So that would be what we would recommend. The ACNC also has a checklist of good governance practice. Most of you being not-for-profits would be registered with the ACNC. You know what I mean, don't make me say it. So they've got a great checklist which we're sharing with you today. So everything I'm talking about with you here, we will be sharing. So I wanted to just, before Kylie talks about using a facilitated evaluation or review approach, is just to say that the simplest way that we have supported organisations is to design a survey monkey. I have a QR code which we just send to people in an email. So this is the easiest way that I've found for people to actually get to the survey, is to use their phone with the QR code, because most people are really familiar with that now. So I email them a QR code which goes to a survey monkey. I'll share that with you here, and every person on the board fills it in. So there's very little sort of facilitating going on. I'm really just sharing the survey with them, which is aligned to the service excellence standards and some good governance practice. So this is what it looks like. How many questions is this one? I think this has got about 18 questions, and different types of questions, you know, that people can, there's some short answer questions, but this is an individual self-assessment. And then you would know with SurveyMonkey, it's really easy to do the analysis and share back. So I would share this back with them, and they might use what they identify as improvement opportunities in their strategic plan or in their risk plan or in their, you know, improvement action plan. All right, so there's that. Oh no, hang on, I've got a few more. What have I got? 20, maybe 25 questions. Oh no, too many. But it still only takes 10 minutes for a board member to do that. All right, and then I get the results. They're all confidential, and I share back, you know, the presentation with the organisation. It can all be done online. You know, we don't need to be there, and I can provide minimal help, which means it's sort of, you know, minimal spend. So that's one way. Kylie, can you talk about your use of the community sector?
Yeah, community sector governance. Yeah, capability framework.
Walk us through it. What do you do?
Really similar in approach, but I guess it's guided by a couple of things. It's definitely to keep it simple principle, making sure that it's just, you know, as time efficient as possible for board members, because we don't need this to be onerous, and it doesn't need to be in order to be effective. So it needs to also be really outcomes focused and action oriented. That's what we really like. We don't want another talk fest. We want to get some actions out of this and boil it down to some actions really fast from the insights that that the board already has and the intel they already have and know. And that it's really cost effective. So we wanted to develop something because we know whether your organisation is large or small, everyone is still time poor or still not really sure. There are organisations not really sure where to start. So we just wanted this almost off the shelf. We're ready to go. We know it meets the ACES standards. It does everything it needs to, but it's a bit more of a facilitated process. So it kicks off with it's really a 4-step process, I think. I've run this with a couple of boards now and have managed to go from go to woe in 4 weeks, which is amazing. So that's from all of the self-assessments through to an action plan in place. So it just shows you the power of, as you say, Marie, doing things online, letting the board members do the questionnaire in their own time. That would take hours in a facilitated workshop. And I actually think people are more open and honest and take a bit more care and time with their responses when they can do it in their own kind of space and time. So that's the beauty of this. So usually I kick off with a bit of a context meeting with the chair or the CEO. The management manager and the chair are really great just to give some context around what the board may have gone through in the last year, whether there've been significant changes, upheavals, challenges, new members, challenging to find new members, and just to, you know, lay the land. And then if there's anything unique to what it is that they do, as you mentioned before, this should also align to their values and vision. So if there's anything else they want to do, that sort of reflection and evaluation on that should be there. So for example, I've worked with you know, a Catholic organisation where their membership and their role of agency and their engagement with their church members and integration was really important. And I've worked with First Nations organisations. I've worked with cultural organisations where culturally responsive, you know, practice and embedding that in the organisation is absolutely fundamental. So there might be things that are a bit unique to the work that the organisation does. And that's what we want this to be, is tailored as well. So to have that kickoff meeting, which is usually for about half an hour, and then we literally send all of the board members. I'm going to do some share screening now. So let's have a little look. And is that questionnaire up online? Is that sharing? Is that sharing? Yep, great. Beautiful. So this is it. So it's really similar to the questionnaire that Marie shared before, but it's focused on 4 streams. So the community sector governance capability framework has got sort of 4 streams that it looks at, or themes, areas. So planning an organisation. So that is about, is the board setting a vision? Do they have a strategic plan in place? Are they looking at the big picture, looking at emerging trends, things that are going to impact their organisation? And are they focusing on priorities? So that's all the planning and organisation. Stream 2 is about monitoring and review. So as Marie mentioned before, are they looking at budgets and financials and getting good reports on those and interrogating? Do they have good compliance management and monitoring mechanisms in place? Are they managing risk? And are they critically reviewing reports? So not just looking at reports, but are they really critically analysing reports and identifying, is the organisation on track and working towards its strategic vision? The next one is about working together. So very personal kind of reflection on, are you contributing to meetings? Are you a really active member of this board? Are you as active as you'd like to be? Or does this align with what you want to do anymore? Or have you become a bit passive? This can also be an opportunity for board members to really reflect and go, do I really want to be on this? Am I giving it my utmost? Can I really give this board what I need to give it? Or could I give it more? So that's what that section is about. Are you attending meetings? Does it have a sound policy framework? Does it foster stakeholder engagement? Is it spending enough time with its staff and its stakeholders and community and making sure that it's really leading that sort of vision for the organisation? And is it providing that collaborative leadership with CEO and management? Because the board and the CEO and management, or regional managers, whatever your management team is, they really need to be a united force and front. And sometimes, although the board self-assessment is focused on the board, what's highlighted is these communication breakdowns and protocols between board and management in sort of being more effective or challenging their effectiveness. So it does look a bit, it's like a board 360 almost. It looks at their own role and how they're working with their stakeholders. And then finally, being effective and accountable. So are they clear on roles, really documented roles and responsibilities for those different treasurer, chair and secretary? Is it ethical? Are they making clear and timely decisions? Are they operating within constitutional requirements and respecting confidentiality? So that's kind of the thematic stuff. These are all the core competencies of a really effective board. And all of the board members get to go through and rate themselves on, do this all the time, to do this none of the time. And then there are role-specific responses for the chair, secretary and treasurer. So the questionnaire takes about 15 minutes for the members to complete. And they just go through, and at the end of each section, they've got the opportunity to provide some comments, some ideas or reasons for why they gave that feedback and suggestions for improvement. And it's amazing how engaged they are in this process. You get some fantastically rich comments back and suggestions for improvement. So we go through the questionnaire. They sort of do that in their own time. We give them about 10 days to do that. Any more than that, and they won't get it done. We all know that about questionnaires. They kind of go to the dead zone after a couple of weeks. So we give them a time limit. And then I produce a report for them. So let me just bring that onto your screen to show you the type of report that we like to, actually something that they can action. So what does all of that mean? And so we generate a report that then goes through the executive summary, some recommendations for consideration. And then the other pages here, the other 20 pages are just the results themselves. We want to feed back all of the intel and everything that we've found. So for example, this organisation, it's really great because it's an opportunity to find out what's working really well, maybe some of the things that have disrupted or interrupted their flow for the last, COVID being a really good example. For this particular board, got into some pretty bad habits of not having regular meetings anymore. And I had some challenging situations where some board members were really great with Zoom, others weren't, and they hadn't really figured out how to bring everyone, up to speed. They were happy with Zoom, but did everyone have what they need? Did all the board members have what they need to participate fully in these meetings? And they didn't have regular meetings scheduled. They'd had some changing staff. So these sort of insights, and then which we translate into what we think could be some really logical and appropriate recommendations, and making them achievable, using SMART goals. We're not trying to we know that this is some actions running parallel to everything else that they do. So we really want to just bite off 3 or 4 key activities on a board action plan that are achievable and doable. And the great thing about a board action plan, which I'm going to show you in a moment, is often you get other newer board members putting up their hands for different areas because it's an area they want to learn, or it's an area they feel that they have got a knowledge gap. So that's what I really love. You end up having new names popping up on that action plan, not just the sort of treasurer and chair doing everything, but you can allocate these actions to other members, not to do, but just to make sure it gets done. Somebody else have got their eye on it. So recommendations for consideration for this group, I send out this report ahead of a 1-hour meeting. So they have this info, they look at the recommendations, they look at the report themselves, all of the feedback. So these are the specific results. You've got the self-assessment. And here you've got a really nice visual. Again, if somebody did paper forms, what would you do with all of that? And that's what a lot of these organizations have is paper forms. Who's going to collate this into something that's really easy to translate? And what you're looking for here is blues, reds, and oranges are probably areas the purple, green, and orange is where you might need some development. So that's your kind of area to focus on. And blues and reds really strong. So you've got a really nice kind of easy way to see what of those sort of competency areas where the board might want to be focused on. And then at the end here, you get these fantastic sort of direct insights, ideas, or suggestions from the members. And so it's those things combined, the colours and their ideas that we translate into the recommendations, because we know that they already know what they need to do, or, the direction they're heading. It's sometimes just about distilling that down really fast for them. The other thing that this report has is actually the skills assessment as well, the skills audit. So that's a bit further down here. Hope none of you are getting motion sickness with me scrolling so fast. So this is the specific responses from secretary and chair, also super helpful, particularly for members stepping into those roles for the first time. It's an opportunity for them to be really honest about maybe some development they may need to take on those new roles. And they are incredibly honest. And then your board skills audit. So again, there's a lot of skills that a great board should have, a wide breadth of skills. And quite often some boards tend to attract similar people through their own networks who've got really strong skill sets in certain areas, but then may be lacking in others. So it's a great way of, as Marie said before, identify the sort of skills gaps for a board, so that if you are recruiting for new board members, you know what you're looking for. The board knows exactly this is about, the actionable part of it. It's not just to go, okay, that's where we're at. It's like, well, what are we going to do with that? Okay, great. What you're going to do with it is identify some training opportunities for your board members, or some learning opportunities, or to attract the right board members to plug those gaps. So they get this report, and then the final step in the process, as I mentioned before, is about a 1 hour. We've managed to get it done in just under 50 minutes. So we're not here to sort of spend too long, as I mentioned before. It's all about kind of being super efficient. And this is what the action plan looks like. In the left-hand column, it's nice to just align it to the capability area that they're trying to develop, because hopefully we see that changing in the colour scales later, in follow-up self-assessments. We see them moving from purple to red and blue. And so it's nice to have that alignment, so you can see if you're kind of moving the dial. What are we focused on? What are the capabilities that we need to focus on this year? Who's going to own it, and when is it due? And so look, this was a really good example of, kind of keeping it pretty simple for this board. They just wanted to schedule regular board meetings. They didn't even have that too far out. So we left this meeting with agreement on when it was going to be and at what time, and whether it was face-to-face or Zoom. It's just having those basic conversations to leave with an agreement. Developing standing board agenda items, again, linked back to ACEs. So here's where, working with, any one of these fantastic consultants here, we can help with that, because we know exactly what should be being looked at and monitored by boards. So we can help also provide some of those templates along the way, which is what I did for this group. So developing their standing board member meeting agenda items. And then communicating that to your management team to say, you know, if things are going to be only every second month, we're going to look at risk or whatever it might be, that you've got a schedule that your management team know what they need to table in advance of those meetings and what they need to prepare. Addressing priority items for the first board meeting. So again, this board was running behind on a few things, and we just tabled and slated exactly what they needed to kind of catch up on. And that was the beauty of having that context setting discussion first with the chairperson and the manager and CEO, because they were able to say, look, we feel like we know we're running behind on these areas. And so it's like, well, let's just tackle these priority areas at this first meeting. And we agreed what they were. They had the strategic plan needed to be reviewed, and they hadn't been looking at things like SWOT. So we talked about what the another purpose of this board self-assessment. It's a great input for the strategic planning process. You know, the strategic planning process is only as good as the quality of the various inputs that go into sort of being reviewed. Things like a great SWOT, a great risk register, a great board self-assessment, all of these, talking to your staff surveys, participant and client surveys, stakeholder surveys are really great inputs to a very effective strategic planning session. So this is really helpful for that. And then clarifying board roles and responsibilities and making sure that they were leveraging, they'd had some new board members, so leveraging different skill sets a little bit better and really having that conversation a bit more actively with the board to say how we're going to sort of introduce and leverage some of these new skills that we've brought onto the board. Induction was one. They'd had a couple of new members and didn't have any structured induction process, so that was highlighted. That came out of this process, the importance of having that there, and identifying some really good governance training. So these are really easy kind of wins that somebody can pick up, and one of the board members can say, right, I'm going to go and do a bit of research. You know, maybe we're a member of NCOS and so we get access to free governance training. You know, one person goes away and says, here's the 2 or 3 governance trainings we're going to approve for our organisation. It's free and they've got a good regular timetable. So they're just some of those things that you don't have to go looking for each time. And then implementing, this was a really good one, implementing and reviewing communication and approval protocols with the management committee. So that was really key. Management committee wasn't sure who they should be waiting for sign off from and approvals for, who to follow up if a deadline had been missed. So as you can see, it's focused on the board, but it sort of has these tentacles out into so many other aspects and elements of, you know, the effective running of the organisation and the strategic plan and those other key sort of items. And as I said, it was about an hour and a half of board members' time, which so super time efficient. And we managed to get through this in about 4 weeks, but it can be, you know, dependent on, you know, the timelines that the board have and what they're working with. But it is helpful to have a facilitated self-assessment. But whatever self-assessment is happening, as long as there is a self-assessment happening, that's all that matters. As long as boards are taking the time to reflect on their performance, what they're there to do, that they take the time to focus on their priorities, and then they come out with some sort of an actionable plan about how they're going to develop their capabilities and continue to improve and evolve. That's the main thing. And there's lots of tools, as Marie said, that can do that.
Thank you, Carly. All right. I'm going to
Thanks, guys. I can't hear you, Marie. I can see.
Oh, well,
there you are.
I was just saying thank you, and what a lovely sort of overview of that process that you undertook with that organisation. And thanks very much for sharing and piloting that approach. A couple of things that I wanted to just say before we wrap up, and there's time for questions. We're not going anywhere, but we always try to keep it tight on that hour. But Kylie works with the Highwire Group as a consultant. So she's, you know, Highwire is a group of consultants and we like each other and we're passionate about community services sector. So that's why we are a group. But Kylie will work as an independent consultant as well. And that's particularly important because we have conflict of interest if we're coming in as assessors and we're also coming in and helping you develop systems and processes. So you wouldn't find, if you're a client of Highwire, as a service excellence client, and we are your assessor, you will find that we need to kind of have that firewall, and we would refer you to Kylie, to work with Kylie independently, if you understand. So I just wanted to make sure people knew that we're very, very cautious about that conflict of interest, and we could never, never, never as an organisation be assessing our own work, so to speak, all right? So that's why if you're interested and you are going to use Highwire as your assessor, that's when Kylie would be putting on her independent consultant hat and supporting you with that. Kay also is an independent consultant. Lisa is an independent consultant. So when they're not your assessor, they can work in those roles, and that's why we're talking to you about some of the things that we like to do with clients to support them. The resources that we're sharing. So Kylie's obviously going to share the link to the governance toolkit that she's used to develop that framework. I'm going to be sharing with you the ones that I like to work with. So I've got a Australian Institute of Company Directors not-for-profit governance principles that I use. There's 10 principles. I'm just trying to find it to bring it up and show you. You should be aware of the ACNC governance self-evaluation for charities checklist, but I'll show that to you again in a minute. Here it is. Excuse my little dogs there. The kids are coming home from school. So what I like about this one is that it's nicely aligned with the good governance principles, but they've been amended for not-for-profit organisations. So they've got a real sort of, community feel to them. So there are 10 principles and supporting practices. And some organisations I've worked with, we've developed our Survey Monkey around these supporting practices. So it's a lovely tool to use, and so I'm putting that in the resources for you. Here is the ACNC governance checklist. This is something that I would recommend that boards do annually anyway, if they are registered with ACNC, because you want to make sure that you're ticking all of their boxes before they come and let you know. And this is, I think it's very positive also to do this one, because you'll be ticking so many of them, you'd be going, oh, yes, yes, yes. So it's very affirming. All right. So they've got 5 governance standards in their framework. And this is a really nice tool to use, because it would, sort of auto-populate your action plan as you go. And you just sort of pick out the actions, and then there's a, close your eyes if you don't like this, down the bottom there's another template for an action plan there, see? So you can just cut and paste them in as you do them. So that's one that I recommend boards do annually. And we're also sharing with you some BNG templates. So if those of you who are using the BNG portal to do your self-assessment online, you will have access to these templates. They're kind of clunky, I will say. You do have to do a bit of work to make them your own. So I'll just give you that little caution. I recently did do that process with a small committee, a regional committee, and I threw it all out in the end, and I just did the Survey Monkey with them because it was harder to sort of get it working for them than it was to now I just have to do a new share here, because I think you're not seeing the right screen. Here it is. I mean, it's thorough. It's very, very thorough, but I'll make that a bit bigger for you. Sorry about that. And it's very nicely aligned to the Service Excellence Framework, but it's just got so many indicators, and I find it a little bit, it's duplicated. A lot of the indicators are duplicated. But, it sort of speaks directly to the board member. So it goes through my contribution as an individual board member, and then it has a look at our board or management committee as a group. All right, so it's just very wordy. I just wish it were a little bit simpler. Yeah, but it is it is at least worded in a way that, you know, board members, if they were reading it, they could understand what it meant. That's not the issue. It's just that there's too much of it. All right. And this one here is the Indigenous Governance Toolkit, which is really beautiful. Oh, that's all right. Okay. Shush, shush now, shush now. And this, I want to tell you, as a toolkit, this is incredible because it is actually an online learning module. So you go through this toolkit as you would go through, you know, an online course. And it's got a lot of Indigenous leaders speaking throughout. It's beautifully contextualised for cultural governance. You know, like it's just, you know, everything is, you know, like they talk about governance as being like a game of footy, you know, and I really love the language in here. And I love that they've got, you know, Indigenous leaders talking about governance in a cultural context. So, you know, I just love that toolkit. When I'm working with Aboriginal organisations, I pull it out. And that's aligned to governance awards as well. So there's a great opportunity there to strive for being recognised. And I don't know of community governance awards that I can tell you about. There used to be, but I don't, I think they might be state-based, but I don't know of any. If you do, tell me about them, because I think that's a wonderful thing to aspire to achieve. Right, what do you want to say to us? What do you want to ask, or what comments would you like to make? Have we given you something of what you might need to understand what those requirements are? We're here to support you. Yes, Emily.
Hi there. I have a question, which is it's a little question, but I would love your insights. And this is around where we're getting a lot of new board members. We've had quite a bit of turnover this year, and our AGM's coming up, and there's quite a few new people joining us, which is super exciting. And then we have our sort of strategy day or session sort of February next year. So I'm sort of thinking of the timing with when we do such an evaluation. Like we've got an injection of new people in December and then a strategy session in February. From your experience, do you think these work better when board members have been in the role for sort of 6 months? Or like, I'm just thinking about the timing of it all.
Emily, that is just such an awesome question, because recently when I've done some of these, and Kylie and others might concur, I get a lot of responses back saying, I couldn't say, I really don't know, I haven't been here long enough. And I'm like, I don't want those kind of responses. It just doesn't give me anything. So yes, the timing of it, certainly definitely after a long orientation and induction, and when, you know, when you're going to get some good data about people's thoughts and feelings. Although a new perspective is an interesting perspective, but you'll have to frame your questions in a way to elicit, you know, those opinions in the early days. So maybe you want to do a new board member survey to evaluate your orientation, your onboarding, right? So that would be one way I might split it up, is do a new board member survey. But for everyone else, the best timing for this, Kylie and I were talking about this today, the best timing for this is if you do an annual review of your strategic plan. Everybody's going, yeah, we do that. Yes. Well, I would do this before that, just before that. I would do it at the same time-ish, yeah? Because it will inform some strategies going forward. So if you identify through this performance appraisal, oh my goodness, look at this big need we have over here, then those kinds of actions might impact the strategic actions or the operational actions. As you could see, Kylie's report, it had some strategic but also some operational actions to improve governance practice. And so they can go in those plans if you do them at that time. They can also be mitigated through your risk plan. So I say, do your governance performance evaluation, review of your risk plan, review of your strategic plan around the same time. Comments? Does that help, Emily?
It does. Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, because this would be overwhelming for a new board member, couldn't it? Sorry, Kay.
That's all right.
I was a new board member and I got a survey, like, I got, oh shit, I don't know any of this. I'm not sure I should be here. So yeah. Yes, Kay.
I really like the idea of a new board member survey because I think that it could provide some really great insight for board members that have been serving for a long time. You kind of can get, your own sort of, goldfish bowl view of things, and asking a new person what they see as the priorities of the organisation or something like that could be quite revealing. So, probably more from, it's almost like a different sort of external assessor, isn't it? But
yeah, it's a different set of eyes.
Yeah, but like much briefer. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think it could be a really useful thing to do, like part of induction, almost your board
That's
induction
right.
program.
That's right. And
Yeah.
that you might not have enough new board members to make it anonymous. So you'd have to just maybe do it as a verbal, or like you would an exit interview if someone were leaving, that sort of thing, or a probationary interview or evaluation. One thing that boards, this is interesting, and I'll close with this because I want to let you go, but I recently did a survey with the board, and I became aware in my early chat, how Kylie said she does a contextual chat? Well, I do that, and I did that with this board, and I was hearing that there was a conflict in the board about a particular strategic direction. And let's just say it was this. It was, should our board get involved in advocating for change in the sector? Right, so this is in the education sector. So should our board get involved in advocating for change in the education sector? Because one board member was saying to me, we shouldn't have our eyes there, we should have our eyes in here, we've got a lot to do here, we should fix it up first. And I was hearing, but we're not doing enough out there. And I thought, oh gee, okay. So I made that a question in the survey, and it was 50-50 split. So I was thinking, wow, this board, they're about to do their strategic plan, and they are not together on what their main gig is. They're not together on, how they would make decisions and how they would prioritise their effort, because they're completely split on this thing, which can cause them conflict. When they're trying to make decisions, it will slow them down. So that's where I love the value of this, to be able to get everyone on the same page about making decisions in the same direction. Because see, that could really, really be a detractor from success. Yeah, so we've just left that one on the table for now with that group, but yes, I hope you have enjoyed our session today. Please, John, is that a wave goodbye or a question?
And this has just raised a question in my mind as to how often boards ideally should meet. We've been meeting now since we started every 2 months, and I'm particularly over the last couple of years during COVID and us building our new shelter, I've got the feeling that it hasn't been often enough. And I'd like to hear what from the shelters that are represented today, at least, whether they're 1 monthly or 2 monthly meeting shelters. That's all I want to know.
Just type into the chat, everyone, whether you're doing like monthly or bi-monthly meetings. John, the rules will be in your constitution. So we'll say in your constitution how many times a year you need to meet. So that's where you start. Then, some boards do the bare minimum, and then they'll have special meetings. Yeah,
we're meeting as per the constitution, but I'm wondering whether that's right, whether it's now needs to be reassessed.
Yeah. I think if there's a lot of complexity and uncertainty, and if there's a lot going on, that boards probably need to have some sort of subcommittee structure. Yes. And so the executive might meet more often, or
that's what
finance and risk subcommittee sort of might meet more often in order to give that sort of bit more forensic look at things.
Thanks, Marie.
But the main gig is to keep decisions going. Right. Yep. The biggest problem with not meeting often enough is that decisions slow down. So you do everything you can to speed up the decision making, not to leave people out, but to not slow the decision making down, because I see that undo a lot of boards.
Okay, I've got some feedback there, so thank
There you
you.
go. Emily's got a subcommittee that meets monthly. So a subcommittee structure is super helpful, even if you've only got a small board. A lot of boards these days, I'm recommending they get more members because they really are, they're really under a load. You know, they're doing a lot of work with a few people. So I say, well, just get more, and then you can always have a quorum and you can have more people on subcommittees. And I know that brings with it additional sort of layers of things, but in general, some boards are much too small in my view. I'm happy to hear from my colleagues or anyone else on that, but if you've only got sort of 6 members, you will sometimes find you can't get a quorum. And that slows things down, doesn't it? Jeanette needs to go. We all need to go. We need to stop recording now. So thank you everyone for being part of this. Kylie especially for sharing your magical tools with us and with everyone. Remember, we like to make it accessible and affordable. That's our thing, right? Accessible, affordable. So please talk to us if you need anything. I'm stopping recording now.